everybody, and welcome once again to All My Best Friends Are Digital, a podcast about video games and the stories they tell. With me is Caitlin Bailey, joining me live from parts unknown. How are you doing, Caitlin?
I am wonderful. How about you, Mark?
No time, Caitlin, no time. We must talk about the games. So, we're going to be talking about what we've been playing this week. We're going to talk about Spy vs. Spy in our retro segment, GOOF. Specifically, Caitlin requested the Game Boy Color version, although we'll have more to talk about there. Mm-hmm. Then we're going to be talking about our feature game, which is The Alters, and we're going to close things out with some shameless hyping of upcoming titles, what we call here at AMBFAD Shout. We love the acronyms, or at least I do, and Caitlin pretends. So, Caitlin, what have you been playing lately?
So, this was a bad week for me, where bad means I had too much stuff I wanted to do, and not nearly enough time to do it all.
Boo!
Yeah, so I started playing The Alters, which of course we're going to talk about later, and then Date Everything and A Building Full of Cats 2 both came out, which was very distressing for me.
Did you pursue my recommended solution?
No, I did not.
There's only one way out of a conundrum like that, and that is to date the building.
I did not do that. Okay. And then I also started playing Dune Awakening with my Tuesday night game group, while half-heartedly attempting to continue with Fire Emblem Awakening, which I spent much more time than you would think, considering how few levels I completed because I had to restart so many times. But anyway, I'm going to talk about A Building Full of Cats 2, and it was a delight, as always. I had a freelance project that I was trying to get done last week because I am capable of saying no to anything. So I had to do that, and I was a little stressed out because, I need my fun time. So A Building Full of Cats 2 was there when I needed it to just let me chill and find some hidden cats and click on them. It was real good.
So help me situate things. It's been a while since you've been talking about the X Full of Cats games.
Yes.
Which entry was A Building Full of Cats? Was it one of the early ones or one of the later ones?
I believe A Building Full of Cats was one of the first ones.
And does this involve any of the, let's just be generous and call them gameplay innovations of some of the later X Full of Cats games? Or is it very much just another entry in the formula?
I mean, I would say that it is very much another entry in the formula, but they do try to keep it fresh, I guess. Yeah, it continues to build on some of the previous games in the series. You are in an apartment building, and you have to take care of all the cats in all the different apartments. And every single apartment has a hazardous number of cats. Even more cats than I have. And, there's a light story that progresses as you go through each apartment with a couple, little events that come up, between sections or between apartments or floors, I guess. And each apartment has a theme. So one of them was retro video games. One was horror. There was a workout one with some sports guy. Anyway.
So that one made a lot less sense to you than the one about retro video games, I would wager.
Yes. There were dumbbells and stuff. I don't know.
Sports things for sports.
Things. And you have to continue to find the cats, that are hidden in the artwork, the cats that are actually invisible by clicking on suspicious spots like closed drawers, and then there's always an item related to the theme. So in the retro video game apartment, for example, there are NES-style game cartridges, and of course, the games that you have to find are all cutesy, kind of obviously riffing off of a real one, but they're, they have a cat name attached to it. I did not write any of these down.
Was there a cartridge entitled Castlevania?
There should have been. I don't think that was one of them.
I don't know, man. I mean, that was what I came up with off the top of my head.
I guess
problem is
cow.
Yeah, that's the difficulty. See, that's why I am not a professional designer of cat games, but merely someone who appreciates the enthusiasts of the genre. That's the big difference.
Yeah. You find all the cats, you collect all of the apartment-specific items, and then when you get all of them, then there's some kind of related mini-game. And the mini-game, that's kind of where they do, some of the other more, not hidden object game stuff. So there's, a rhythm mini-game.
Oh.
Some of those sliding piece puzzles that we all love so much.
Ugh.
They're all pretty quick. You just quickly go through it, and then you're back to looking for cats. So, at the price that Devcats sells the games in this series for, it's a steal for me because it just lets me turn off my brain.
Yeah, it's just a couple bucks, right?
This one was $7.
Oh my goodness.
But yes, I know, my goodness. But all the others, I think, are under $5.
Is that like a cat-based tariff or something? I
It
understand
might
that
be,
that
yeah.
might be an issue. I'm shocked that at any point you try to find things that are not cats.
I know. But they're generally cat-related or the mini game ends up being cat-related. So, in one of them you have to conduct a little cat orchestra.
Okay, sure. I mean, there's an idiom about herding cats, but I don't know about conducting cats.
Yeah, there is no... you know what? Never mind. There probably is some stuff that could constitute herding of cats. It's cute. The art continues to be really cute. There's really chill music. It's a building full of cats, too.
That's great. I honestly don't understand why there aren't more games of this ilk that are described as cozy.
Mm-hmm.
Because so often... Make no mistake, dear listeners, I have a great deal of enthusiasm and tolerance for pandering. It's why I continue to consume Macross media at the rate that I do. But so many cozy games are just so many of the same, like, crafting variety.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's an awful lot like work.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you really like cats, just, give me some great cats. Don't tell me that I need to harvest a whole bunch of cat seeds and plant some cat plants and wait for the cat plants to grow and then harvest the cat plants. And if I don't water the cat plants, I'm not going to get my cats. I'm not saying that just sounds too difficult. It just seems not particularly cozy to me. I don't know. But then again, I've never been particularly interested in that genre to begin with. But when you describe Building Full of Cats, that to me sounds cozy.
Yeah, I completely agree. And honestly, a lot of it kind of piggybacking off you said about cozy games in general. Yeah, they are an awful lot like work. Like, I enjoy them. Give me a farming game and I will play the hell out of any of those farming games. But there's also this, it's hard to avoid that tendency to like try to min-max it a little bit. And I feel like as soon as you get that, it's not cozy anymore.
When I think of cozy, I definitely don't think of things like infrastructure and supply chain management. Yeah. And so many of these cozy games seem to have that. And I don't really get the appeal, frankly, in terms of the vibe specified. But when you talk about Building Full of Cats, I'm like, yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah, it's the right kind of cozy.
I'm very glad it's what you wanted. I'm very glad it was able to deliver the experience you desired. All too often, the particular vibe we want, we can't get more of.
Yes.
Until the known producers of that specific thing come up with their next offering.
Exactly. I'm glad that they have a pretty regular dev cycle over there at Devcats.
Well, it's in the name. I mean, they develop cats. It's the thing they do, so.
Yep.
So are you going to be tided over until the next time Devcats releases something? Or are you already jonesing for more?
I'll probably be tided over. I'm hoping to be playing some Date Everything next week. So, I'll have... I don't know if that probably doesn't count as a cozy game, but it counts as a game that I want to play.
I think I can recognize a game that fits into the cozy game paradigm, but I could definitely see how the vibe of Date Everything could be accurately described as cozy out of context, but in the context of video game, cozy has tended to mean a very particular set of mechanisms. Whether or not the resulting vibe materializes, I don't know. It seems strange.
Absolutely. What have you been playing lately, Mark?
So I've actually been playing a retro game from 1993, and that is Star Trek The Next Generation.
Okay.
Yeah, so there were a variety of different Star Trek The Next Generation games. This is the NES game that had a Game Boy port released in 93. And specifically, I was pointed to it by a discussion I was having with Tech Dweeb. So, Caitlin, have you ever played the Artemis Spaceship Bridge Simulator?
Yes.
Did we ever play it together? I can never remember.
I don't think we did because I had moved by then, and the only time I remember playing it was in person with a few other people.
I see. So this is after you abandoned me. Got it.
I think so.
The thing about the Artemis Bridge Simulator is that it harkens back to old school LAN party things. Because, you can kind of play it online, but it's not really at its best in that context. And frankly, despite my tremendous enthusiasm for the Artemis Spaceship Bridge Simulator, I would never trust it with an online connection because the biggest hurdle, other than getting the requisite number of people together in the same place, is the fact that it is janky as all get out, and I routinely remember missions failing because of network or software errors. And if one team member has a problem, the mission spirals out of control very quickly. Because it is about managing a spaceship, And there are different sections, and every player is assigned various numbers of sections. The thing that really sold the concept to me of the Artemis Spaceship Bridge Simulator is that the captain has the best views in the game. They are able to see screens that allow them to synthesize information, trade off long-term and short-term priorities, and really get a sense of the overall information flow. Unfortunately, the captain cannot operate anything at all.
Yes.
Their terminal is entirely passive. If they want to get the strategic view, someone else needs to give it to them. So it is really a game about in-person communication. And it's really joyous when it works. Those moments when everything's working, everyone's vibing with their station, and you've got a good captain. In my experience, the captain's very tricky. You need a good captain in order for everything to get work. I enjoy being the captain in a move that surprises nobody. But anyway, when everything's singing, it's marvelous. And then, 2 minutes before the mission's over, everything craps out. But
yeah,
I have a great deal of enthusiasm for Artemis Spaceship Bridge Simulator. It's a shame that I haven't played it recently, because one of the downfalls of playing it, 10-ish years ago was the difficulty of getting the requisite number of devices together. But now this is trivial. With everyone having 7 supercomputers on their person at any given time, that part is no problem. And I really wish that I was in a position where I could do that more often. I keep meaning to have an Artemis party like I used to. Anyway, There's a version called Quintet, which some people have recommended. I don't know. I've never tried. I'm vaguely curious. But I'd have to have enough energy to get back to Artemis and then seeing if that was as enjoyable as I remember, and then possibly branching out into other versions. But suffice to say, it takes seriously this idea that spaceships are big, have different sections to manage, and that you have to coordinate with all the sections in order to get the thing to work. So this isn't Rogue Squadron, this isn't even X-Wing, this is not one pilot managing power systems at the same time as operating everything. This is a distributed system where everyone needs to cooperate and they're all doing their own thing, albeit in concert. I love this kind of structure. And when talking about that, TechTweet said, there was a Star Trek The Next Generation game that was kind of like that for the Game Boy. And I said, really? So I immediately tried it. And it turns out that there's an NES version as well. The NES version has the virtue of having color graphics and slightly better graphical fidelity. But fascinatingly, the graphical renderings of the various cast members of the show are slightly inaccurate in the NES version. So the Game Boy graphics are actually quite good. Like, that looks like Jonathan Frakes. That looks like Michael Dorn.
Yeah.
In the NES version, they have color, and color isn't the problem. It's it's almost as though somebody looked at that picture of Sir Patrick Stewart and just decided to fudge up a couple details just to see if you were paying attention. Okay. And so consequently, it looks very similar to Patrick Stewart and simultaneously not at all like Patrick Stewart. It's very weird. Anyway, moving on. Sure enough, it captures that element of spaceship management that I very much appreciate. You have to basically coordinate with various members of your crew in order to activate specific systems. Now, this is a single-player game, so these crew members are not represented by other players. But if you want to go travel somewhere, you go talk to Lieutenant Data, and he goes and sets a course, and you go off and do the thing, and you have to talk to Geordi LaForge to manage your power systems, etc., etc. You go talk to Miles. Anyway, you go talk to the transporter guy to do the transporter thing. I can't remember dude's name, but whatever. He was there. He was a thing.
Yeah.
And all of these are mini games. In order to go into orbit, you need to do a silly little mini game of passing through rings in first-person perspective at the bridge viewpoint. In order to transport people up, you need to go find them and then have the reticle hover over these weird stick figures that are wandering around for no earthly reason, just to make the lock more difficult. All of this is delightful. I was 5 minutes in to playing Star Trek The Next Generation thinking, this is genius, this is amazing, I love this. And then the combat started, and now I hate the game. Because the combat, now not every mission has combat, sure enough, and this is another thing that I very much appreciate, because I'm a huge fan of Star Trek The Next Generation. I'm less of a fan of New Trek, and one of the reasons why is because when I personally, this is a personal, save your emails, New Trek fans. I don't want to hear it. Miss me with those complaints, because I'm phrasing it very specifically. When I am in the mood for Star Trek, the Star Trek that I like is the boring kind where combat is seldom. Where it's just a whole bunch of people solving weird, sciencey, gobbledygook things, the occasional moral conundrum thrown in. I do not go to Star Trek for the same vibes that I get from, say, Star Wars or Macross or things where lots of ships are going pew-pew. That's not what I'm interested in.
It's funny that you would say that, just because that also describes many of the video games I like. I just want to go. I want to try to, like, in Baldur's Gate 3, I'm going to try to solve things in a non-violent way first,
Yeah. There's a very strong vibe of combat being a consequence of failure, right? That a competent individual would have been able to solve the problem, resolve a difficulty or disagreement or whatever without resorting to fisticuffs. And that is, again, something that I very much appreciate about the utopian future of Star Trek. At least the Star Treks that I like. Miss me with all your complaints and comments about other Star Treks. Anyway, so Star Trek The Next Generation is one I very much like. But there are fights. Occasionally combat occurs, and it's a video game, so naturally you might have a higher proportion of combat than your average season of Star Trek The Next Generation. That's fine. The combat's terrible. It's so bad. It's really, really muddy and indistinct. So here you are, you're fighting. It's very bad first-person combat. You're very sluggishly moving your screen around. The first time I had to do combat, it was tolerable. The second time I had to do combat and the enemy was moving faster than my reticle could move, I knew I was in for something.
Yeah.
So you start getting damaged, and then you have to go to Geordi to repair things. That trading back and forth between the weapon viewpoint and dealing with the damage felt so Star Trek-y and satisfying, at least the notion of having to do it.
Yeah.
The practice of doing it, though, was just painful and sludgy, and the sheer painfulness of trying to line up a shot to hit something in the context of just shooting phasers. It was so bad, Caitlin. So bad. Meanwhile, these other things are zipping around you all over the place. I'm not asserting that the Enterprise Class D would be super maneuverable, but it was not represented as some sort of massive tugboat that couldn't get anything within targeting range.
Oh, I can just imagine that reticle slowly moving across the screen trying to catch up to a guy.
It's as fluid as you would expect first-person combat to be in an NES title.
Yeah.
Which is to say, not at all. I was so disappointed because I was so there. I was willing to go meet the game more than halfway in terms of its graphical presentation. The mini-games were simple, almost to the point of being simplistic in some cases, but I'm like, I don't care, this is cool!
Yeah.
And the combat sets in, and it's like, this is the worst. I cannot. And so ultimately I'm very disappointed. As an experiment, as a historical artifact, I think it's really cool and interesting. And indeed, comparing the graphical versions of the original Game Boy version and the NES version was kind of interesting. And if the combat had just been a little bit faster or a little bit more automated even.
Yeah.
Like again, these are very simple mini-games. It's a collection of super, super simple mini-games. It gets by on vibes and positive feelings I have for the property. If they'd kept the combat the same level of complexity, in that a lot of it was automated, like give me a self-tracking reticle or something. They're phasers, for crying out loud. They're not direct fire straight ahead weapons. It comes out of that little thing in the disc, and it just goes wherever it needs to go, right? That's how phasers work. I know how phasers work. I mean, that's how it worked in Star Control 2, and that technology was more... Anyway, setting all that aside. Caitlin, just as a note, whenever I mention Star Control 2, you have to hit a button or something to stop me.
Okay.
That would just be... Okay.
Okay.
So, that was Star Trek The Next Generation. I was so feeling it, despite its clumsiness, but I just can't. I can't. All the non-combat bits make me so happy, and all the combat bits are so disappointing.
Yeah, that's too bad that they seem to have done, such a good job with the rest, and then they just ruin all that goodwill with terrible combat. Yeah.
Now, this does make me more enthusiastic to, A, go back to Artemis.
Yes.
B, consider Artemis alternatives, and C, there's some new games that are trying to roughly evoke this idea of spaceships are big and complicated, and you, as a crew, need to go and do things. So there was the Jump Ship demo recently. I tried a little bit of it. I found it very interesting. Once it gets a full release, I suspect my friends and I will give it a try online, because it's the kind of thing that some of my online friends very much enjoy. Void Crew, I found conceptually interesting. I know you played more of Void Crew, but I didn't really like the demo tutorial and so never got into it. But anyway, it's a fascinating genre, or subgenre, if you will, and I really like seeing how different games approach it. And again, even structurally, Star Trek The Next Generation is great. I just can't recommend it.
Yeah, a little while back, probably more than a little while, but I tried out Star Trek Bridge Crew, I think, which is a VR game. The VR game, yeah, I've heard so many good things about it. When it goes right, and you have the people with the right vibe,
apparently it's wonderful.
Yeah, I had fun with it. I could not. I think we only played the one day because I was like, I'm gonna die if I have to play in VR anymore.
Yeah, VR does not seem like your scene with the motion
No,
sickness.
but it was a fun experience. Fun thing to try once and never again.
So that's Star Trek The Next Generation. Moving on, we're going to talk about a retro game and our gaming opinions on old school funware, aka GOOF. We're going to be talking about Spy vs. Spy, specifically the 1999 Game Boy Color version. The original version was published in '84 on the Commodore 64. We did not play that one. I, in my youth, had the Sega Master System version published in 1988. Whereas this dusty old cartridge is one that you pulled out from your, I assume, massive retro, I'm going to say, dungeon, full of every console ever made and a smattering of miscellaneous titles.
Yeah, so I have this little red cardboard box. I don't know why it's red. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I don't remember where I got it from, but it has all of my memory cards, which, for the youngins in the audience, a memory card is what you used to save games on, but we don't use those anymore. But all my memory cards and my Game Boy games were in there, and I opened it up and saw Spy vs. Spy, and I was like, oh man, I don't remember the last time I played this. We should play it. That's why I had suggested that version.
Do you have any experience with the source material?
I do not. I actually didn't. I probably technically knew that it was from the comic, Spy vs. Spy comic from Mad Magazine, but I never had Mad Magazine growing up, so I have no experience whatsoever with the comic.
I'm not surprised you didn't have a lot of experience with Mad Magazine. Mad Magazine I associate as very male-coded in a number of ways.
Yeah.
I mean, it's marketed primarily towards young men and boys, I think. And, I mean, as an institution, it's got some impressive elements. And I think Spy vs. Spy is one of its less puerile offerings. And by the way, when I say puerile, I don't even necessarily mean that as pejorative. I like lots of puerile things.
Yeah.
It was started, I did a little bit of looking into it. It was started in 1961 by Antonio Prohias, and it was a satire of Cold War, not even just spycraft, but general statecraft and geopolitical relations. And part of that satire is just the notion that the spies are completely interchangeable, and what it is that they're trying to achieve is overall irrelevant. It is mostly just the foibles of them frequently both losing or one getting advantage over the other as case depending. So this is a real-time game with a sort of split map. At the time, in '84, on the Commodore 64, it was quite technically impressive to have the split map, and both players would be playing against each other on a top screen and bottom screen type of arrangement. And the goal is to accumulate 5 items and get to the exit before your opponent is able to do the same. I say 5. There are 4 key items, but the 5th all-important item is the bag, because normally you can only carry 1 item at a time. In order to get more than that, you need the bag. On top of that, you're punching the crap out of each other, you're setting traps, occasionally diffusing traps, although that's a little more arbitrary.
Yeah.
Question, of course, Caitlin, I couldn't help but notice that the Game Boy Color version has a tutorial.
Yeah.
Did you play the tutorial?
I did.
Oh, you did?
I did not remember enough of the game because I never played the tutorial when I was younger, and I had no idea what I was doing at any given point.
So this is a long-standing character flaw.
Yeah.
I mean trait, I mean tendency, I mean fixation, I mean neurosis that you have.
Yes, it is.
Pick whichever one of those you find least insulting. Okay. So this time you acquired some information about how to go about doing your Spy vs. Spy business.
Yeah, I did the entire tutorial. I thought it was quite well done. The only part that I didn't understand, and I'm not sure that you're supposed to understand, is how you know which is the right exit. I guess you don't. You just try them all until you find the right one?
It seems random. I think you're just supposed to try them all, yeah.
Okay.
So what did you think about Spy vs. Spy, Caitlin?
Okay. I thought it was neat. I got some of those, feel-good nostalgia feelings while playing it. I think that the little giggle that the spies do when the other spy, either when they set a trap or when the other spy sets off a trap, just brings me so much joy.
It's the kind of audio clip that I worried would get super old, but never did.
Yeah.
It is very satisfying.
It's absolutely very satisfying. And I played, I think there were 4 different levels that I could see that I could choose from, and then I think 10 or so stages within each of those levels. I ended up playing one of each. the other aspect that I quite enjoyed was at the end, after you successfully, hopefully, exit, you get to see a cute little animation of your spy getting away with all the stuff that they needed, and then the other spy inevitably drowning, blowing up, doing something silly as their last big attempt to try to catch you. And it, of course, never works.
I was very impressed. This is the second time, and much to my surprise, that a classic game has, I think, one of the best versions on the Game Boy Color. If you'll recall, dear listeners, when I was subjecting Caitlin to Prince of Persia, which went right over her head based on her refusal to engage with the tutorial, I recommended the Game Boy Color version because, unlike a lot of the other more technologically sophisticated adaptations, like there's one for the Super Nintendo, there's one for the Genesis, etc., the control schemes there I felt messed with it in a way that wasn't very good. Whereas the Game Boy Color version looked very faithful to the original, but slightly updated, only very, very slightly, and had a good tutorial. And frankly, I feel the same way about Spy vs. Spy. This is much better looking and has more lattice work and more structure and a good tutorial when compared to the other version that I'd tried, namely the Sega Master System one. So way to go, Game Boy Color.
Yeah. Game Boy Color continuously surprises me by like how many good titles were on it.
That may partially be because of the fact that, by my count, there were roughly 2.7 trillion titles released for the Game Boy Color.
So, of course, there's some good ones, yeah.
I mean, naturally, it's inevitable. Yeah, it's weird. So, this is another thing that TechDweeb and I talk about all the time. Anytime a system is released or persists such that the hardware is a little bit antiquated, but nonetheless it is current in terms of sales, you find a mature environment where the developers sometimes really exert the technical maximum that the system can accommodate, but nonetheless have more sophisticated game design ideas. Now, for example, this is one of the reasons why so many people love the Game Boy Advance. The Game Boy Advance was kind of the last gasp of 2D graphics gaming, but by the time the Game Boy Advance came out, we were already in the 3D world with slightly more modern game design conceits. So you have these people working with modern game design idioms, but with beautiful 2D graphics.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, my equivalent is the Neo Geo. That's one of the reasons why I love the Neo Geo so much, because it outlasted its normal technical lifespan by so long that people were, again, using contemporary design idioms in some contexts while exerting the graphical maximum available. So the Game Boy Color might have been at roughly a similar juncture when it got released. It wasn't quite powerful enough for a full 16-bit environment. Like it's not as... It doesn't seem as capable as the Super Nintendo, certainly in terms of graphical fidelity. I mean, the tiny screen was just not good enough. But nonetheless, you had slightly more mature design chops. So like a lot of interesting ports got released, a lot of interesting games. So one thing that the Game Boy Color design did introduce that was not in earlier ones was hand-to-hand weapons. So sticks and knives. Okay.
Those weren't in the older one.
Yeah, and I don't think they add to the game much at all, because if you've got a stick and your opponent doesn't, they have tremendous range, and suddenly the madcap running around trying to get traps and defuse traps is suddenly completely defeated when the optimal strategy is to just charge at your opponent and whack them upside the head.
Yeah. Most
other versions knew that should be a last resort. It's very much like Star Trek in a way. It's exactly the same vibe.
Damn combat ruining everything.
So you enjoyed Spy vs. Spy.
I did. I think... So, okay, I was a little concerned at first when I'm going through the tutorial and it tells me that when you get killed, the items that you were carrying basically get taken away from you. I thought you were going to have to collect the entire thing all over again, like find the briefcase and find all the individual items. But no, thankfully, if you had stuff in the briefcase, it stays in the briefcase. So the only thing you, or unfortunately the enemy spy, need to find is the briefcase. So I thought that was cool. It helps to like kind of up the tension a little bit toward the latter part of a level, because it's just the two of you killing each other over and over while trying to make a mad dash for the exit once you get the briefcase, or trying to prevent the other guy from getting to the exit. So yeah, I don't know. I had a lot of fun. I'm probably done playing because, I feel like it ran its course over the couple of hours that I played, but I'm glad that I did it.
I imagine it would profit from being played two-player.
Yeah.
Because against the PC isn't nearly as satisfying. I mean, the AI is fine. It doesn't seem particularly overly strong or overly weak, but it's just not the same vibe. It's not the same satisfaction you get from murdering the PC from an electrified bucket that you would get from doing so with a friend. It's weird. I too was immediately reminded of the original game. The Sega Master System game that I had, this was one of the few Sega games that I had when I had a Master System. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things where, you're forced to play the games you have. And when you've got 5 or 6, you're forced to play. I've disliked this game for more than 30 years. I appreciate what it's trying to do. The whole thing with all the traps is conceptually interesting.
Yeah.
And the structure, I think, is really cool. But I just find it a frustrating, difficult to track. It's definitely Madcap, that's for sure. But I find Madcap in a frustrating way. And particularly the centrality of finding the briefcase at the start of the game just feels very, very random and arbitrary. I particularly hate the fact that I can feel like I'm being all clever and I'm defusing a trap. I found the right item to defuse the trap, and I'm setting up all these traps to protect myself. And it's all undone by, here I am messing with the map for half a second too long.
Yeah.
Just enough time for the opponent to just rush me and punch me in the face over and over and over again. And I recognize that there has to be some point of conflict independent of the traps.
Yeah.
But I felt that the overall balance was just a little bit off. And so there's all this clever stuff you can be doing, and then there's all this effective brute force nonsense you can be pulling in some cases. Not always. It's a tribute to the game that it's not always, but sometimes.
Yeah.
And consequently, I just find it a frenetic and unsatisfying experience, frankly. I always have. And going back to the original, it felt the exact same way. Here I am struggling with the map, thinking about, if I do this cool thing, and he's gone. Okay.
Yep, it's not going to work out. Yeah, I think that it is frenetic, but that didn't bother me. I guess I just, I had fun with it, just rolled with it.
It's very much the point of the game. It wants to be frenetic.
So yeah, I think it was at least good for me. I think that I would really have liked to be able to play it with another person to see what that was like. I only ever played against the computer, but it is what it is.
So you got a fascinating glimpse into my childhood of having no friends and only a mediocre selection of games. As opposed to my current life of having no friends and having all the games in the world, but not enjoying them.
Oh, Mark.
I'm exaggerating. I
know.
Love playing games. I even love playing the games that I don't like. So
that's good. I'm glad.
So that is Spy vs. Spy. We're now going to take a brief break for some ads. And we're back with The Alters. The Alters was released this year in 2025 by 11-Bit Studios. 11-Bit Studios is the same group that brought us This War of Mine and Frostpunk, which in my particular case ought to have constituted what we call in the industry a warning. But anyway, it consists of the misadventures of Jan Dolsky, who is the sole survivor of a crash, and it is alleged that the crash may or may not have been caused by the quantum navigation computer, but nonetheless they use this quantum computer to calculate various possible alternate lives that Jan might have led, and in conjunction with a sci-fi/magical substance called Rapidium, they use that to grow clone-ish alternate versions of Jan. This is all layered on top of the fact that Jan has to find a way off this rock and avoid the encroaching radiation that might zap him to death, and so he needs to build modules to expand the base. He needs to throw various resources at the weird bicycle wheel-looking base so it can roll along to the next destination in advance of the sun. And what we have is a sort of sci-fi psychological alternate history kind of thing, coupled with base management and resource extraction.
The only thing that I would add is, in addition to base management, there's also some level of relationship management with your alters.
This is true, because Jan needs to settle the fact that Jan and Jan and Jan do not like each other, and that Jan and Jan got into a fight, and Jan messed up the kitchen.
Man, that Jan guy, such a jerk.
Okay, so you brought it up. I haven't played too much of the alters. I played through a couple chapters. And the game throttles how many Jans you can have.
Yes.
It's not just a function of resources. I have so much Rapidium, you wouldn't believe how much Rapidium I have. Despite the fact that the game keeps telling me that this magical element is very hard to get, And very satisfactorily, there are plot elements of the corporation that sent the mining, the exploration mission, constantly telling you over the phone, it's like, but the rupidium, though. And he's like, okay, I'm starving to death, but the rupidium, though. You gonna come get me? Tell us more about how much rupidium you have. I have tons of rupidium. No problem. Yeah. That ain't an issue. But the game artificially throttles how many yawns you can have at any given time, which, fine, whatever. It's an element of the structure, in addition to the food burdens and various other things. All the yawns I've encountered, I guess this is a bit of a spoiler structurally. Skip ahead if you don't want to hear the editing mark here. If you'd like to skip very, very minor spoilers, please skip ahead 1 minute 26 seconds. That's 1 minute 26 seconds starting now. All the yawns I've encountered have been jerks. Like, real jerks. I'm sympathetic to the fact that this is an awkward situation, and it's a bit of a rough scene, but they're unpleasant people. Has this been your experience?
So, the first yawn we create grew on me a lot. The second yawn just kind of sucks, and he's a necessary evil, I guess, but he really kind of sucks. And then of the others, so how many yawns have you created?
I have seen 4 yawns.
4, okay. So I have, I've created 5 total, and I would say 2 of them are definitely jerks. One of them is, like, he's not a jerk, he's a little sad. He's a little pathetic, maybe. Like, I mean this in the most loving way, but, like...
He's a bit of a sad sack.
Yeah. And then the other one is just a gym bro, and he's fine. Like,
it isn't even just that they're jerks. Like, jerks can be very, very interesting and useful in a variety of fiction settings. Let me put it a different way. The primary problem, I would say, to clarify, isn't that they're jerks, is that I hate talking to all of them. Because they're unpleasant people who express themselves unpleasantly, and the conversations, setting aside the presentation, I'll get to that later, are just not ones that I relish. It's just a whole bunch of, I gotta talk to that dude again, whether they're causing a problem or not. And I gotta say, that was a non-trivial dampener on my appreciation of the Altars, because structurally the Altars is genius.
Mm-hmm.
But in the process of exploring the world, which is largely the process of exploring the different yawns, I just found it unpleasant.
Yeah, you walk by a yawn and he's like, oh, I have to see your face again. It's like, oh, sorry.
Then there's the issue of presentation. And so much of it is just done with these very, very, very flat dialogue presentation scenes. The occasional strange still image with narration layered over top. Mm-hmm. And the entire time I was playing, I think there was only one scene that I thought was remotely cinematic or interesting from a storytelling situation. And this is when Jan is forced to make his first altar, and the music and the camera work and the staging was all about how Jan was very unsettled about this entire procedure. It was done very subtly, it was understated, and it was really, really cool. And it is utterly unlike how the game presents itself the rest of the time.
Yeah, it's true.
Which is, again, a doubly a shame because a lot of the things they're dealing with are super interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, imagine the whole conceit of being able to talk to a version of you that made different life choices and thus had radically different life experiences, and the kinds of conversations those two people might have, the way they might view each other, is genuinely fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of playing around with these ideas of life choices, of mistakes, of regret, of these character inflection points. There are the moments where they're actually able to bond over common ground are rare but feel earned.
Yeah.
Especially when so much of the time they're so unpleasant. And those parts I thought were great. Like, really interesting, and they're playing around with really, really solid ideas. And the structure of the altars, as I say, is borderline genius.
Yeah, so as far as like these conversations with the different characters, I think it's really, I feel like the altars is at its best when they're talking about, like, they're not talking about, oh, you know, you didn't build me a bed and I'm really mad about it. It's when they're talking about their life choices and, you know, one Jan is still with the woman that main character Jan divorced years ago, and like hearing how they talk to each other, hearing about how distressed some of these Yans are that their life wasn't real, that it didn't happen, even though they have all of these memories. I think that is all, it's really good. Like, that stuff engages me so much, but it's compared to all of these, like, oh, I'm mad because I need a bed and you didn't build me one yet. It's like, sure, people would be mad about that, but it shouldn't be like half the conversations you have with these people.
Yes, and I feel like another solid proportion of the conversations you have with them is some version of, I have character trait X and you have character trait Y, and that is why I'm so much better than you, and I hate you, and I hate the fact that you're like this. And it's not even just that it's rude and unpleasant, which it very much is. It's that sometimes, instead of phrasing it like that, you have the two characters talk about why they are the way they are. They say, oh, well, when this event in our life happened, I chose to do this and you chose to do this other thing. That's interesting. I've always wondered what would have happened if I'd done it that way. Mm-hmm. Do you want to compare notes because we're very different? And you can even have them conclude at the end of the day that they hate the guts of the other Yon that did the other thing. That's cool. That's fine. I don't expect them all to be kumbaya.
Yeah.
It's just that so much of the time they decide to focus on like the uninteresting interpersonal conflict. It's not petty like a reality show, but it's far more reality show than the interesting science fiction that they're doing the rest of the time.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It feels like, I mean, I would like to believe, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but I would like to believe that if you put Jan and a few copies of Jan in a place together where they have to work together in order to survive, that they wouldn't just be having petty, annoying arguments all the time. Like, at the very least, maybe scientist Jan and technician Jan just wouldn't talk to each other very much because they obviously hate each other's guts. Like, just don't do it. Go talk to one of the other Jans that you don't hate as much. Like,
another thing that it does, and this is getting slightly more into the storytelling structure of the alters, that again, I think is so sad because I don't enjoy the alters nearly as much as I want to, and as much as I think I could be in a slightly different context, is because we are one of the Yans. Naturally, we're more sympathetic to their viewpoint. And being that Yan is hard. And none of the other Yans have any sympathy for him at all.
No, not at all.
And so consequently, that just further alienates us from the rest of the cast. I respect the fact that the game didn't spend several hand-wringing hours of a power struggle of the various Yans being like, why do you get to make all the decisions? I should make all the decisions. Whatever. The game drops that, and the Yans, without even acknowledging the reality of it, start accepting your assignments as though you are the God King Yan of this rotating base.
Yeah.
But the thing is that so much of the game is about the primary characters, the Alpha Yan, if you will. His struggles of being torn in all these different directions, not just in terms of resource scarcity, not just the expectations of the corporation, but all the expectations of keeping the base alive, and of all the expectations of these personal difficulties these other Yans are having, and the pet peeves they have, and the specific toy they want made for them. And the game doesn't cut you any slack, and neither do any of the Yans, and it just becomes a little more unrelenting, and it causes us to resent these other characters, rather than treating them exclusively as these fascinating lenses through which we can reevaluate the main character's life. Mm-hmm. The tools are all there. The structure's there. When I the first time visited the quantum computer and I saw Jan's life laid out for it, and I understood that I could then branch off from various key decision points and evaluate what kind of person would come out the other end, I'm like, this is genius.
Yeah.
And instead, all I got was a whole bunch of lip.
Oh, yeah, you are correct.
So yeah, we may be stranded here, and maybe we have to work together in order to survive, but I want my ping pong table, and I'm not going to shut up about it until you do it.
Yeah, I mean, it is funny because we know that they are in life-threatening circumstances this entire time. When sunrise arrives, which it will after, 20, 30, whatever days from each time you get to a new area, everybody's going to burn up and die. So you would think that they would be a little more understanding that you couldn't figure out how to build their ping pong table in the span of those 3 weeks while you're also trying to figure out how to get across the lava river. Like give a little grace here, people.
So, on the topic of gathering enough resources to survive and cross the lava river, there's all the base management stuff. There's the resource gathering and base management stuff. How much did you enjoy that part?
I enjoyed... So, okay. I was a little tired of it at first, and then eventually the altars teaches you how to set, like, upkeep for items, basically, so that you can say, hey, I want to have 5 radiation filters at any given time. And that took a lot of the burden off. I was getting stressed out about having to go to each thing and make sure to set a certain number of items that had to be made. One of the things that, and then, so, okay, it was a little frustrating, even after that, remembering to manage what all of the Yans were doing correctly, because, I mean, Scientist Yan is going to be researching 99% of the time, that's fine. But then I have this other Yan who I want to spend some time in the greenhouse, but then when he's done there, I want him to always go to the kitchen. But every now and then, he finishes in the greenhouse, is like, hey, want me to go do this other thing that you probably don't want me to do? I really wish that you could assign, like, priorities to the Yans or something instead of assigning them to a single place. And maybe that would have complicated things even more. But I found after, like, at one point when things were getting a little stressful, resources were low, I woke up in the morning and, nobody cooked yesterday because nobody managed to get assigned to the kitchen while they were doing all their other stuff. And that definitely could get a little bit frustrating. I also didn't enjoy the actual mining of the resources. I didn't mind the shallow veins, like going up and, just depleting a vein. That's fine. You get a bunch of resources. Great. But the other ones are slow enough that if you need to get a significant number of materials, you're probably going to have to spend the entire in-game workday mining those materials in order to get enough. Like, I don't know. That part just wasn't fun. I know that eventually you can unlock something that can, like, automatically mine for you, but it honestly seems later in the game than I thought it should have been. And then, finally, there's also the enriched metals, which are great because you can break them down into regular metals and organics, I think it is. But, by the way, it's irradiated, so whoever goes there, if you send one of your altars, they're just going to get a radiation burn and not be able to work. So the only person who I think can realistically go is yourself. And I don't know. Parts of that were not fun. But I thought that designing the base was super cool. I loved exploring the world outside the base. I thought that the maps for both were really good, but gathering resources sucks.
It's tedious. It's kind of what we were talking about before. Too much of it, not all of it, but too much of it feels like work. I don't have a good sense about the sort of... This is a minor complaint, but I think it touches on what we've been discussing. I still don't have a good sense about what the technology in the world of the altars looks like, because this is why it matters. You go, you find the vein, you set up the mining device, but then what you have to do is you have to set up a bunch of relays back to the base from the vein. And so not only do you have to tediously place all these pylons to find the vein in the first place and then drop the sucker there, and if you don't have enough mining devices, you have to go all the way back to the base to make a new one, and then haul yourself all the way back. Anyway, what has to be done at the base and what can be done in the field is all over the place, and I find myself going hither and yon just because that's the way it works. But anyway, you set up these relays to go all the way back to the base, but which means that you cannot teleport the resources back by themselves. You have to set up, like, telephone wire back. But then why is it the case that I can run around with 3 mining devices, 27 pylons, and a whole bunch of other devices that magically fit inside my TARDIS pocket? Anyway, okay, fine. It's because that's how the game wants it to work. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But then there are so many artificial deadlocks. Like, I have more than enough Rapidium, but I can't make more Yawns because the game has a gate kept on that. Okay, fine. I don't have enough storage space, so I gotta go back to the base, build a new storage facility, and then leave and then go trigger in the mining. Okay, fine.
Yeah, managing storage sucks.
The most important modules, many of which are story dependent, rely on minerals. But minerals you don't find until a very particular point in a certain map. And until then, they come as though manna from heaven, and they're just this artificial, the story has decided to bequeath upon you these things. And now you can actually manage the minerals. But oh, by the way, you have 7 different altars yammering at you for 7 different advanced modules, and you only have enough to do one of the things, or you can do the story-dependent thing. By the way, do the story-dependent thing, or you're all going to die. Anyway, it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
And so the management in addition to not really being my preferred kind of video game to play, like, I don't like Satisfactory. The reason why I don't play Stardew Valley is because I see the throughput concerns that drive a farm in Stardew Valley, and I immediately think it looks too much like work. And The Altars is not nearly as complicated as either of those two games. Not nearly. It's much, much simpler. But there's enough tedium of just running hither and yon. When I'm exploring, that's great.
Yeah.
When I'm talking to the other Yons and we're comparing notes on our on the lives we've lived and the choices we've made and the people we are, it's great. When I feel like I'm in an episode of the Real World Yon Edition, or when I'm just setting up relays, so this new resource vein I've tapped can actually deliver the resources, or when I'm running back to the base to build the new storage module, I feel like I'm wasting my time.
Yeah. So they also have this module that lets you, is just a fast travel teleport. So you can put it somewhere that isn't a mineral vein or whatever.
Yes. It's a different kind of pylon. Yes.
That also requires power.
Yeah.
And so far, I haven't yet found a place where I would put that where I wouldn't just be able to place like a mining pillar thing.
Well, you can hook it up with normal relays. So if you're willing to do that painful, obnoxious part of setting out the relays every 30 meters or so, you can make a new fast travel point in the middle of the map.
But it's so annoying.
I agree.
So annoying.
It is annoying.
And when you mentioned, oh yeah, you better do the story thing or else you're all going to die. Yeah, so I made it to day 60, and the sun came up, and I was like, uh-oh. Meaning, okay, we were like 6 days out, and I was like, okay, I think I can do this. I know I have to build this. I have to place that and that. I think I can do it. But what I didn't anticipate was one of my altars got mad at me, and he refused to do any work for the rest of those 6 days.
Oh my goodness.
So, yeah, I ended up deciding to completely restart Act 2 from the first day of Act 2 because I couldn't figure out. I'm sure that I could have loaded a save somewhere between day 1 and day 30 of Act 2.
Sure.
But I didn't know at what point it was recoverable.
Yeah.
And instead of playing through half of it only to find out I still couldn't do it, I decided to start over. But it really drained a significant portion of the enthusiasm that I had for the altars, because I was playing it constantly. I would log in as soon as work was done. Log in, it's not an online game. But I would load it up as soon as work was done and play for a while and just have a good time and, be frustrated about the mineral gathering or whatever. But I was having a lot of fun. And now that I have to redo the entirety of Act 2, I'm pretty tired of it. I really want to see what happens. And I know that I will make it through Act 2 eventually. But it hurts to have to redo everything.
For what it's worth, I have some of the same complaints with respect to this war of mine, and when I hear people talk about Frostpunk, it sounds like more or less the same. You're playing with really big ideas, and there are these very interesting concepts and interesting interpersonal conflicts, sprinkled in a whole bunch of micromanagement tedium that is there because that's just the kind of management game they seem to want to make, right? It's their deal. It's what 11-bit Studios likes to do. And it's what a lot of people like to do. A lot of people love this kind of management stuff.
Yeah.
And when it's okay, it's okay. But when it's tedious. And I mean, I find it very telling that both you and I, who have very different calibrations for these kinds of things, both found that the good bits were mostly propping up all the rest of the bits, which sadly constitutes a lot of the actual moments you're going to be spending with the altars.
Yeah.
All of that having been said, the good bits are really, really good and super fascinating. And I too am curious about what happens next. I don't know how much more juice I've got left in the altars for me. I suspect what's going to happen is that, kind of like you, I'm going to hit something, and it looks like some altar is just being difficult for the sake of being difficult. But let me tell you, I'm not restarting any chapters for them.
No.
Somebody says, I'm going to hold my breath and stamp my feet until I turn blue. And you're like, okay, all the yawns are dead. Moving on.
And we're done. Yeah, I think that is very fair. Like, I'm so curious what's going to happen with, because you get to meet the, I don't know, kind of the head honcho over this project. And he seems super sketchy. And I want to know why he's super sketchy. I want to know if anything comes of that. I want to know what the corporation's going to do with all this stuff when they find out what's going on. But I have to play through all of Act 2 again. So, might take a while.
So that's The Alters by 11-Bit Studios. As like many of the feature games we talk about on All My Best Friends Are Digital, it is on Game Pass, so give it a try if you're at all inclined. We're now going to close things out with some shameless hyping of upcoming titles. Caitlin, what would you like to shout out for us?
I'm going to shout out, I guess it's like a remaster of Final Fantasy Tactics. It's Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles. Tactics really hooked me back in the day with its plot twists, betrayals. Like, I just thought the story was so good, and I had never, at least to my, as far as I can recall, I don't think I'd ever played a game that had so many twists as Final Fantasy Tactics did. Or, like, twists that really caught me off guard and surprised me and, like, made me even more interested in the story. So I'm very excited that there's an updated version coming out. Of course, I will also grant that I don't have the time today that I did back then. And a single battle could take a very long time. And I'm probably even exaggerating. Like, in my head, it's like, oh god, that battle probably took at least an hour. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it was 30 minutes or 40 minutes. But it was long enough that it's like, okay, I really hope that I can, like, save the game in the middle of this thing. So we'll see if you'll be able to save the game in the middle. I have no idea if you could do that in the PlayStation version. It's been too long since I played. But I do love me some Final Fantasy Tactics, and I'm excited that it's going to be coming out again.
I'm very curious to see what they do with it, and I hope that more of the weird one-off games from that period of Square get re-released. I've been talking about Vagrant Story needing to come back in some way for a long time.
That would be awesome.
Could be a prequel, could be a pseudo-sequel, could be a side story, whatever, or a remaster. I'd be happy with anything, frankly.
Fingers crossed. I would love if they did a remaster, because that would really, like, finally make me be like, okay, fine, I'll play Vagrant Story.
So I would like to shout out Pragmata. This is by Capcom. There have been some interesting promotional things revealed. I gotta say, normally, a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have been this super excited because Capcom very much seems to have settled into new Resident Evil games, remaking old Resident Evil games, and occasionally re-releasing their older titles in collections. But off of the Capcom Fighting Game Collection 2, which is, quite frankly, a stunning success in terms of the titles they've decided to bring back, and I would even argue the way they decided to do it, and off of the super weird and super satisfying Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess, that is the lens under which I am super excited about Pragmata. Because if Pragmata is just another weird new thing that they're trying in the vein of Kunitsugami, then it could be really good. So I'm hoping that it's more of that flavor and not just another cookie-cutter thing, because Capcom clearly still has a lot of super talented people working there, and when they give them license to do new weird stuff, sometimes it turns out really well. That and the robot looks super cool, I think.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of Pragmata. What kind of game is it?
Apparently it's a kind of an action puzzle hybrid game. I don't know.
Okay.
Which may or may not, like, if you had told me that Kunitsugami is a hybrid hack and slash real-time strategy game, I would have said, I don't really like real-time strategy games.
Yeah.
But I just tried it sight unseen and really loved it. So I normally don't like puzzle games, but who knows? We'll see.
Sweet.
Well, with that, we're going to close things out for this week's episode of All My Best Friends Are Digital. Thank you so much, dear digital friends, for joining us. If you would like to support free and independent video game media, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/AMBFAD. We have bonus episodes, we have ad-free episodes, we have all kinds of cool bonus content there. And we hope you're able to take care of yourself, play some good video games, and we'll see you soon.
Have a great week, everybody. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to get in touch, you can reach us at allmybestfriendsaredigital@gmail.com. Hope to see you again soon.